Hey, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Why does God let me be evil? Why does he give me the capacity to do it? Wouldn't it be better if he just got rid of that? Then I would be good all the time.
Off the top of my head, it would be so much better if there was that kind of control. Just have it so that you're always within a range of not so good and very good.
So why didn't he do that?
Well, there would only be one drawback to it, which is that it would wreck not only for you, but for the entire human race. It would destroy everything. Other than that, it's a really fabulous idea.
Welcome to Swedenborg in Life, everybody. Dr. Jonathan Rose, thanks for hanging out. I'm Curtis Childs, your host. Today we're going to delve into, it's a slice of the problem of evil.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Because we're talking about why God allows, maybe not even as much why do evils happen on a broad sense, but if you look inside the human heart and mind, why do I even have the capability in the first place?
Right.
To think evil, to will evil. Why didn't God nip that in the bud? We're going to give you the answer for that today. So,
can't wait.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to wait a little because to understand the answer to that, we have to talk about free will.
Okay.
And what free will is and why it's there and what it does. So this is coming out of Swedenborg's book, New Jerusalem, which if anyone out there doesn't know New Jerusalem, like that is just a couple page summary of all the important points in life, right?
There's no other Swedenborg book like it where he just kind of broke it down for everybody and to have these little quotable chapters. A lot of them are only like 2 pages long that would give you a summary of like, here's what's going on with this, here's what's going on with that. Just covering all the bases.
Dude, I was watching or listening, what's the difference these days anymore, to an interview with a politician. There was the news person and the politician, and the news person was asking a question. And as she was asking it, she's like, I already know you're not going to answer my question. I've asked this so many times, but here's my question. And the politician was, well, this is in New Jerusalem, you ask the hard questions. Like, why does God allow evil? There's an answer. It's a straight answer. It's no beating around the bush. This is exactly how it is and works.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to give you right now. Well, I mean, history will be the judge of whether we did that here. So we got to talk about freedom because obviously I think everybody in the world, whether they feel nauseated by that explanation or whether they like it, they understand freedom and evil are in the same neighborhood. Like that the reason why there can be some evil has something to do with freedom, right?
Having the option. Yeah. Yeah. Why do we have that option?
What is freedom? What does it mean to be free?
Yeah, well, I'm interested that Swedenborg seems to have 2 very different definitions. And
they're not, well, I was going to say it seems like he defines freedom differently than a regular person would, but not really. If you were to just say to me, what is it to be free? I would say, well, free means being able to do whatever I want.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
the first thing that would come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want.
And that is one of his definitions.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because freedom has to do with what you want to do. The more that something impinges on your ability to do what you want to do, the more it feels like your freedom is being impinged on. If I was walking around reading this, thinking about it, and I was looking over it, there's just some like apartment complex over there, and I thought to myself, if somebody told me I was never allowed to go in those apartments, I don't care. I don't really want to go over there. I wouldn't really fight it. I wouldn't really feel like my freedom was being impinged on. If somebody said, I can't go in my house, I would really feel upset. Or if somebody said, I can't leave the room that I'm in. It has to do with what do you want to do? And if you can't do what you want to do, then you're not free.
Yeah. It's amazing our sensitivity to when, even from early childhood, to the slightest impingement, right? You know, if somebody's shutting down something that you're enjoying, if you did it 84 times and you really want to do it an 85th time, but some parental figure or somebody else figured,
this is hitting a little too close to home right now.
84 is enough of that, you know. You have a fit because, the sensitivity is extremely Yeah, it's high sensitivity.
People don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be told what to think. Even we'll get comments on this channel that, because we're sitting here, let's face it, we're talking about religion. We're talking about very religious, churchy, spiritually, but it's a sector that's fraught with people telling you how to do stuff. And we'll get comments on our channel that's like, oh, I like how you guys don't say I have to believe this. Like, that's how low the bar is.
Yeah. It's funny how religion really got into somehow thought its business was tell everybody what they, ought to be doing. And not just tell them what they ought to be doing, because the Bible does lots of that too.
Sure.
But really try to enforce that in some way, through social controls or through shaming people or ostracism or whatever. Just really try to, get them to do the right thing.
By the way, everyone, like this video if you didn't like it already.
Yeah.
Or else.
That's right.
Or else, like, people will notice that you didn't like it. So I feel like that's important to say, freedom is what I want to do. And it impinges on what I want to do. Because you have, which might seem trivial, but to Swedenborg and to this argument, that matters a ton. If you're looking at why is the human heart have the capacity to do evil as well as good, to contemplate falsity as well as truth, it has to do with freedom is being able to do whatever you want. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is from New Jerusalem.
And that's only freedom 1, but we're also going to get to talking about freedom 2 at some point.
There's 2 for the price of 1.
Yeah.
It's 2 freedoms, baby. You're free to choose which freedom you want to think about more.
Yeah.
New Jerusalem 141, freedom. All freedom is a function of love, because what we love, we do with a sense of freedom.
So he's doing his thing, which he often does, which is to associate. Okay, I'm going to associate. If we want to locate this word, let's locate it relative to some other words. And he's already, I think, had a chapter in the book on love.
Yeah.
And so he's, okay, love, here's freedom. That has something to do with love. And you can see that, because if the kid loves doing the game or something, you don't want anybody interfering with that.
Freedom is very stressful when we're trying to do this, because I know everybody who's watching, they're so free to just, I'm going to turn this off. This is not interesting. Right. There's a million other interesting things I could go watch. So even right now, as we talk through this, and I think, oh no, but wait, I want to be able to say, you have to stay, and you have to understand this freedom and love thing, but it's like, no. I am free to go where I want. You guys have to make this interesting for me. But this is groundwork that's got to be laid.
Yeah.
Freedom, what is it to be free? You might think it's that I can consider all options. It's not really what I want to do. It's that I can consider all options and then choose. But the act of choosing is because you choose the thing you want the most for whatever reason, that the wants that converge on that trump the other wants. Like there's those cookies, I want them sort of, but I know I'm on a diet, so I won't. Sure, but that's still the thing you want the most overall.
That's right.
That's what freedom is, because freedom has to do with your will. There's 2 parts of a human being, according to Swedenborg. There's your intellect, which is like your thinky self.
Right.
And then there's your will, which is like your feeling self. Freedom has to do with the will.
Yes, right. And love has everything to do with, that's where love lives in us, is in the will. Thoughts, truth, that sort of thing. It lives in the intellect. But so it's your will. And you can see that. You would say of a kid who was upset about being frustrated, or not getting to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
That, they're strong-willed. That's their will, that's their love, that's active, and those go right together, don't they?
It's scary.
Will, love, freedom.
It's scary because when it's like, ooh, the thing I'm going to say to this child, to this child of mine, this is going to be directly against the will. Like her will is engaged. Yeah. I already know she wants to keep doing this. When I say this thing, it's like I'm adding this chemical in here. It's going to explode. I already know, because you just get a sense of, like, the will is strong.
And so it strikes me that often what you're having to do in parenting and grandparenting and so on is, rather than just take it straight on, like sometimes you have to go straight on, right into the bridge abutment, just right, okay, we're going to tackle it straight on. But often, if possible, better would be, oh, here's this other thing over here that you also love. Here's food, or here's a show on the iPad, or here's something.
Like eat 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, even if you really mean 7. It's like we're starting to ease in that transition.
Yeah, because that bending, I think, so the will it can be more easily bent than just absolutely thwarted. I mean, the reaction can be better if you take it from one thing that you love to another thing you love.
You can change your mind. Oh, I changed my mind on that. It's a little harder I changed how I feel about that. Like it goes a little slower. It's a little more organic. Okay. So whatever we love to do, we do with a sense of freedom. That is freedom itself. When you're like, I'm free, it's because I can go do what I want to do. That's what freedom is. Therefore, returning to the quote, therefore, all of our freedom is connected with our will. Because whatever we love, we also will to do. Since our love and our will constitute our life, freedom too constitutes our life.
A fourth term in there, life. Yeah.
I think that some people say
our life.
It would be better if God did not give human beings free will, because look at all the problems. I would love that. Like, what I think that would mean is, what if you just had people who could only be good? But I think what Swedenborg argues is that what it is to be a people is to be free. That consciousness and freedom are not separable. That's what it is to be a sentient being, is to be a free being.
Yes. And to have, how many times a day do you choose? Well, I'll go downstairs. No, I think I'll stay up here for another second, and then I'll go down later. All these little choices.
Yeah, and always influenced by, what do you love? This can show us what freedom is. Namely, that it is a reflection of our love and our will, and therefore our life. This is why anything we do freely seems to us to have come from ourselves.
Yeah, and a reflection is an interesting word. It's as if, because Swedenborg says in other passages that our will, our love, might not be something, sometimes you can feel like your heart is on your shirt sleeve. I'm really engaged with this.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't really know. Or how many movies are about the fact that, I didn't realize I care more for this person than I thought, or something like that. Right?
That's what Christmas movies are. It's like, I didn't realize where I want to be is here with my family. I thought I wanted to be at the office climbing the ladder, but really, that's what it is.
And so to think of your freedom as being, okay, this is something more sort of out here where I can see it. I can't necessarily see behind my own eyes to see what's sort of driving me, but I can see this, what do I choose? What was more important to me? Oh, wow, I had the option of sitting down to eat right now or doing this. And I actually, even though I love food, I actually did this instead because, wow, that must be really important to me.
But the plot thickens, because what seems to be one thing, this freedom that you have, where I consider my options, one of them I want the most, that's what I go do. And this time I'm choosing this thing in column A, this time I'm choosing this thing in column C. There's just this one thing going on. It's my freedom, a million different situations in a day, but it's applied to all these different things. Actually, there's not one, but two phenomena happening there. There are two kinds of freedom. They might seem to you over the course of the day like it's all the same thing, but you are doing two very different things when you are making your choices, and doing them through these abilities or capacities that are as different as night and day, as different as heaven and hell are. That actually, it's not just freedom. It's the freedom to do good and the freedom to do evil. Thank you. I felt like that was like some kind of like movie intro I did there.
That was really good. The freedom one, that way we were talking about it before, is just that left or right, chocolate or vanilla,
Yep.
It's really basic sort of choice making. But what you're saying, what Swedenborg's saying, is that there's a freedom to, like, what you choose does make a difference. And one of those things you choose is freer than the other one. It's freedom two. So you have freedom to choose. You have freedom one to choose freedom two, or it's opposite. Like that choice
we're playing 3D freedom chess here right now.
And this is so typical of Swedenborg to use the same word for both of those things. So freedom is to choose one thing, one of which is freedom. Two things, one of which is freedom.
That's right. But they both seem like freedom, and you'd both call them freedom, because freedom, you feel like you're free whenever you're getting to do what you want.
Yeah.
And on the surface level, going and doing good, sure, you're free to go do good because you can want to do something that's good. You're free to go and do what's evil because you can want to do something that's evil. Now, there's a difference between if somebody's forcing you, like I was under threat of my life, so I had to carry these drugs across the border or something.
Yeah, right.
That's different. That's not your will being engaged. But the freedoms we're talking about is, I want to do what's good. I want to do what's evil. Swedenborg goes so far as to say that one of those is actual freedom, the other is slavery. And this is the distinction. This is from New Jerusalem 142. Doing evil freely, that means doing evil because you like to do it, seems to be a kind of freedom, but it is actually slavery. Since doing this freedom comes from our love for ourselves and our love for this world, and these loves come from hell. This kind of freedom actually turns into slavery after we die.
That's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Well, at least he makes it less chilling in this sentence. Since anyone who had this kind of freedom becomes a lowly slave in hell afterwards. Oh, he made that worse.
Yeah.
So that's creepy.
Yes. Yeah, and so what it makes me think is that we're conscious of ourselves sitting here making choices. I want this, I want that. I don't want this, I don't want that. But there's also something pressing in on us that has its will, wants us to choose this or that. And so as we choose it, they look absolutely the same in a way. Just the fact of being able to choose looks, well, it's my choice. I can do this or I can do that, whatever. But the fact that one comes from heaven, and it's going to have a good effect on us and on other people, and the other comes from hell, and actually we're signing up for more slavery to hell, and hell will have us do more things for hell. We'll end up serving hell. They're very different choices.
It's like you went to a restaurant and you came and sat down at your table and the waiter handed you two menus. You thought, that's kind of funny. There's two different menus here, but they're sitting there and you don't really choose what's on the menu and you don't really make it, but you have a choice of which thing that's on the menu you choose. Heaven and hell are giving you the menus. So what's going on in your mind? There is a huge amount of interference, both positive and negative, from heaven and hell. They're giving you the menu. They've decided what's on it. And depending on but you still have you could still pick what you want to eat. And it might seem like, well, these menus are just both here. Someone just goes and brings it back. But it's actually two kitchens. There's hell's kitchen, heaven's kitchen. And it's a completely different source for that enjoyment. If you could actually see the nature of each, they're completely different, even though they feel bored. They're like, this is fun. I made fun of this person. That's fun. Oh, I helped this lady across the street. That felt good. Those things are entirely different.
What a confusing world to have a waiter walk up to you and hand you two, which I picture the two menus are exactly the same size and shape. It just really looks like a binary choice. Here's a simple thing, But what? And yet you don't realize that, the whole kitchen, the food source, everything on one of those menus is just like it'll take you and a bunch of other people down, and this other one is moving towards a better world for everybody.
All of religion, all of the spiritual life is just getting you to understand the menu. When you're maybe you're like a teenager and you just can't tell the difference between this is the thrill of excitement, I'll just do whatever. Yeah. As you grow and as you learn spiritual principles and everything, that is saying, I understand the calorie count in this thing. I understand where this is sourced from and how that's all that's trying to do is get you to understand those menus.
So I don't know if this is your analogy. I don't know if I'm allowed to.
I just made it up, man. You just pay me like 15 cents every time you use it.
Okay, good. That's a bargain. It's like having two menus, and then it's like there's a third simple little card on the table, sort of like you sometimes have,
Yep.
you know, that just says, choose this menu. You know, and that's all it says.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, but the card just, well, that's weird. Why would they give me 2 menus and then say, choose one? And this is like scripture or like teaching or mentoring or a therapist or somebody, you know, somebody who's trying to help you in your life.
So this, he says, when you go into this freedom from hell, when you go in and I love doing what's evil and believing what's false and acting on that and reaping the consequences of that for myself and others. He invokes the afterlife. Swedenborg does. He says, this kind of freedom actually turns into slavery after we die, since anyone who had this kind of freedom becomes a lowly slave in hell afterwards. Knowing, as I feel like I do, the broader corpus of Swedenborg's works, it doesn't mean in hell, in the afterlife, you're like everybody's a slave. However, hell is an increasingly restricted life where people do keep each other in bonds. There's consequences for your actions. It's like everything you do in a hell direction constricts your freedom, constricts you overall. That's why you could call it slavery. And I was thinking of this analogy. Let's leave the menus behind, because you could say, how could the freedom to do something actually be slavery, being allowed to do it? And I think about it like this. So let's say that there was a DUI checkpoint on the road.
Okay.
And you are there with your friend, and your friend is obviously over the limit to drive. And you're telling them, don't get in your car and drive. There's a checkpoint right on that road there, and you're going to get caught. If in that moment that your friend was like, I can do what I want. I want to get in my car and I want to drive. Okay? Because that's what I'm going to do. I'm free to do that, and I'm going to go do it. Yeah, in the moment, they got to do what they wanted to do. However, what that's going to do to your life is constrict it, because they get on the road, get busted by that. Now, I don't know exactly, but your license is revoked.
Right.
You got a felony DUI conviction, so now there's a lot of jobs you can't get.
Taking the bus to work or whatever. And
your whole life has gotten constricted by that, even though in the moment you felt like this is what I want to do. That's the way it is with everything evil. That's the way it is with everything evil.
You get 30 seconds of freedom to feel like, yeah, you know, the heck with this DUI business. You know, I'm going to do what I want. And then, and it gets impinged. And so that's very interesting, because I've thought about the slavery of hellish freedom in terms of the fact that hell is not a very nice boss. Like when you work for hell, like the whole work structure and who your boss is and how they treat you is worse than having angels, you know, giving you suggestions. Angels don't boss you around. And, you know, they handle the whole thing differently, respect your freedom more, love you, you know, want to help you grow. And the other is just like, you know, you're a vile slave kind of thing.
Just look in your mind right now. Look in your mind right now. Sorry, I'll return you to your thought. But how are your negative thoughts versus your positive thoughts? And how are your fears and anxieties and despairs versus your positive feeling? Which one's more pushy? Which one's louder? Which one will leave you? Which one gives you space? Which one doesn't? Hell is absolutely constricting, and it's driving. And the more you dump yourself into that, the worse your mental climate gets. Heaven, a lot of people can't even hear it's there.
No,
because it's so okay. All right. Okay.
When you have some time, you know, when you wake up in the morning,
like it's there.
I'll tell you a little something. And it's there helping out. But yeah, that's so true. It gives me goosebumps, because the loud, pushy, that's a big part of how that whole hell chain works. And so there's that kind of slavery, which is that you're working for a pushy boss.
Yes.
When you're working for hell.
Yep.
The working environment is not as good. But there's also another aspect that's striking me right now, and we've talked about it sometimes in other episodes, that there's also that you can't do what you love. And that's also a form of slavery, right?
Yeah.
Because you run into something. It's like the parent saying, you have to stop now. This is like a cosmic sort of like, well, you love tormenting people. You love savagery, or you love tearing people apart or violence or whatever it might be. You can't do that. You can think about it, you can fantasize or whatever. You cannot do that, or I'm only letting you do that up to this point.
Yeah.
And that's only because it'll be useful to people. And then we're going to stop. We're not having cookie number 85 or something, when we're not doing it. And
not that cookies are evil, but it's such an easy analogy.
Yeah.
It's such an easy analogy to talk about, food, like it's not a moral issue, but it's an illustrator of a moral issue.
So it's both slavery of sort of working for hell, but it's also just that impingement, that not the word, which we all know from the time that we're 1 or 2 years old, that it feels like hell to us not to be able to do what we love. If there's something you want to do, something you want to contribute, it's horrible to feel like you can't, something's just thwarting you. You had physical illness and now you can't do the thing that, you love to ski and you broke your legs or something like that. Now you can't do the thing that you love. It's a terrible, terrible feeling. So that's part of I see two kinds of slavery in there.
Yeah. So, because there's two factors to feeling free. One is the internal, like am I in possession of my faculties where I can make decisions, essentially I can control my own body and go try to do the things I want to do. There's one freedom, but there's also the external environment. I can be very, very free in my consciousness and in my control of my body, but I'm in a prison cell, and so I can't get out, so I don't feel free. Loving what's evil and going and diving into that makes it so that what you love, as you were indicating, what you love becomes less and less palatable to the rest of the human race.
Yes.
The rest of us are not going to let you do that.
Yeah, we're not support. You might find a few like-minded people, but basically society is trying to get you not to do that.
Whereas
it's antisocial.
The freedom to do what is good, as you follow that and you start to enjoy what is good, you are starting to want things that are more and more freely accessible. So when you want to do what's good, the deepest joy within that is to be useful. It means to go and do something that's good for the human race. Will we, the rest of the human race, let you do something useful for us and support you in that? Why, I think we will. And is that accessible every day? It's not hard to go, like I could get to go have a job and do something every day. When you love your spouse, like if I love my wife and that's what I want to do, is like, do I have opportunity to go and do nice things for her, make her happy? Yeah, I do. And when you have things that you love that are helpful to the human race, it's like you dig in, like you can get more and more of what you want.
I often think about this phrase from Scripture. That doesn't mean I won't misquote it, but there's a phrase I love which says in the epistles, "Against such there is no law," and it's talking about good things. It lists a bunch of good things to do. I think it's in a general one of those great lists from Paul of these are bad things, these are good things.
Yeah, and
then it lists these good things, and it says, "Against such there is no law." I often think about that. Like when you think, well, should I could leave flowers on their doorstep. I don't know if that's cool. I'm going on their property and all that kind of stuff. But then you think about, well, the doing of good really is not forbidden by law. Generally society welcomes acts of love and kindness,
Yep. Well, so in the spirit of that, let's continue in New Jerusalem. In contrast, freely doing what is good is freedom itself, because it comes from a love for the Lord and from a love for our neighbor, and these loves come from heaven. This freedom, too, stays with us after death and then becomes true freedom, because anyone who has this kind of freedom is like one of the family in heaven.
Whoa. There's a lot in there, and that's a really, really beautiful thought. And the idea of that freedom is just that you will not be thwarted. You can choose this menu, you can choose that menu, but if you choose this one, the good one, you will not be thwarted. You'll get to do that thing. There's no sort of after you die, well, we're going to have to tamp back on what you enjoyed. We're going to have to cut back on this, and you're going to have to do less of this than you like. No, it's like, no, we encourage you, go do more, be more. That's great. And I like the fact, it's very interesting, isn't it, that it says that the true freedom is after death. It's like you can do that here. And I don't know quite what the difference is, but there's something about after we pass on that it really kicks in a more profound, and maybe it's because we get sorted out, because we all have baggage that we're dragging around with us, hereditary evil, whatever, and some of that gets kind of resolved. We're never free of it, but it gets dealt with in a certain way where you're more pure and single-minded, as Scripture says. So now just go do the good thing. So that true freedom awaits us when we run that course.
So we've got this claim by Swedenborg that there's two kinds of freedom. That actually the distinction between going and doing what's good and because you want to, and going to do what's evil because you want to, those are entirely different things. They appear similar, they feel similar, they're entirely different, and going to do evil actually doesn't work. It makes you less free, and going to do good makes you more and more free forever. Some people could listen to that and say, that's not how it really works. Go look at the list of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world. Are they good people? Every single day there's some new headline about this celebrity. Turns out they were being terrible all the time, and they've committed all of these crimes, and yet they were rich and powerful, and everybody else who's rich and powerful probably was doing those bad things with them. We'll see if they get caught. You could be forgiven for thinking, dude, that's not how it works. I think that's why Swedenborg talks about the afterlife when he describes the qualities of these. Because if you take somebody who, let's say that they used all of the evil and cunning that they could to get wealthy and powerful. I was trying to think of a second ago, where did I hear this line? I think it was from Harry Potter, because I was reading it to my daughter, and it said, my master told me that I used to have these foolish notions of good and evil, but then my master showed me that there is no good and evil. There is only power, and those too weak to seize it. I think some people might think that's really true. Yeah. I was watching some little YouTube short, like scrolling through, and somebody was talking about this other guy who wrote this book called The 48 Laws of Power. And I thought, that sounds kind of interesting, because maybe there's something about, how to do a good job being useful or something. And then so I just looked at like a summary of the list, and it was just so Machiavellian that it was like law number 1 was like, don't outshine the master. Okay, fine. But numbers 2 and onward are things like, be careful. Use your friend. Your friends will betray you. Keep your enemies close. Never let anyone know your plans. It's just totally. There's not any moral redeeming quality in it. I haven't read the book. That was my assessment. I felt like this is like a cartoonishly. But there's plenty of people who would say, "What are you talking about, you little guy, you little wimp on this YouTube channel? You didn't go out and seize that power like I did." The thing about that is, everybody dies. And when you die, your body and circumstances and wealth are gone, but the condition of your spirit, your status remains.
Whatever, it's gone.
So if you have spent a life using whatever means to feed your love for domination and for endless materialism, you're stuck with that. That's in you. Like if you have destroyed your conscience, you have done terrible things to people, crushed them on your way up or used them or whatever, so that you no longer have a real sense of like, that's wrong, I shouldn't do that, or you're so used to doing it, that stays with you. That is part of who you are. If you're used to waking up in the morning and your goal is meaningless, pointless enrichment of yourself, and you don't care about the suffering of the human beings, that stays with you. And what that does is it draws people like you to you in the afterlife, and they're coming at you with the same fury you go at everyone else with.
They're probably better at it than you are too.
It's
obvious.
They've
had longer to figure it out.
It's obvious to everyone around you in the afterlife that that's what you're like. And do you really think people are going to want to hang around you then? You don't have the wealth and power you had before. You have really set yourself up with a terrible condition of spirit, which in the afterlife, that's what determines your condition of life. So you're not getting ahead. People think, these people are doing evil and prospering. Evil is by nature always constricting. You always lose in the long run when you do it. Or that's what Swedenborg indicates based on his observations of how the afterlife really works.
I got to hang out with some near-death, studies people recently. I know you've done that a bunch, and it was very fun. And one of the things that they were talking about was how many people have near-death experience, and it changes the whole trajectory of their life, because they were on this pursuit of like, okay, the most important thing is to get my kid into the best school, and I've got to do this, and I've got to achieve that, and I've got to hit this mark. And then all of a sudden, bang, they get a near-death experience, and then they're just like, wow, well, that was all a waste of energy. I'm just going to love people. I'm going to, and I want to learn more. And I want to be. Raymond Moody said there's a great little clip on his website that one of his mission, whatever you call it, one of his values is to just be loving to everyone he interacts with. That's what he's working. And he's achieved the things that other people are longing to achieve. He's extremely well known. He's put this whole phrase, the near-death experience, into the language, and he's well known and loved by millions and millions of people. But he didn't get there by like scrambling and stepping on other people's heads. And
there was a woman who had a near-death experience. I saw her account on YouTube or something, and she said that she had her accident or whatever she had. She was out of her body, and she looked down and saw it, and her first thought was, well, I don't know what all that vanity was about. Like, that's what I look like. Okay.
All those hours.
Yeah, and Swedenborg was kind of on the same trajectory that he was. He was
we
trying
talked about that. Yeah, that's right.
He's trying to amass power and wealth, and had a lot of
make a name for himself.
Freedom to do what he didn't realize was evil, but was evil at the time. And he totally changed around and would never trade it back for the world.
That's right.
This is going back to the quote. Swedenborg then says, "This is how the Lord expresses it. Anyone who commits sin is a slave of sin. A slave does not abide in the house forever, but the Son does abide forever. If the Son makes you free, you will be truly free." So
the slave doesn't abide in the house for
well, the Lord,
like you get kicked out at some point or something.
And if you look at that as like this is the Lord telling us about Himself. So He's saying that as the Son, like this is the way of being. Like, I'm telling you how to live. If you become free through living the way I'm telling you, that's real freedom, because that gets freer and freer and freer forever.
I imagine it's actually difficult for us to picture. I'm not sure I know what it is, because when you go through, I know he gets to talking about self-compulsion at some point in there, and it certainly doesn't feel free all the time when you're trying to restrain your own lower self, not do everything that you want to do, that your lower self wants to do, not eat everything or have every experience or whatever, and just focus on other things. It doesn't feel like wildly free all the time. It can feel constraining, or like, I'd love to, but I can't, or so I wonder if we, it's cool to think of that may be something we hardly even know anything about, how good that would feel, that freedom.
Yeah.
Because I think it does. The way Swedenborg describes angels, they have these powers. They're very, very humble, but they have these powers.
Yeah.
They're able to shut down evil spirits with just looking at them. They can stop thousands of them. And it's just stuff I think that we can hardly imagine what that freedom entails.
If you want a little demonstration of it to yourself, go like start to run. I don't run very much, but like when I'm running for exercise, while I'm doing it, it feels like I'm not very free right now. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be feeling this feeling. I would like to stop. But if I make myself go for a decent amount of time and you push through that, then when you stop, you feel great. You feel so free.
That's
you got
right.
all these endorphins. You feel like I'm doing some good exercise. I'm in health. The freedom you get after that is much better than the freedom you had before you did the run. So to close that quote, he says, "Since everything good comes from the Lord and everything evil from hell, it follows that it is freedom to be led by the Lord, and it is slavery to be led by hell."
Yeah, it's reminding me again. I know I mentioned it in another episode of that Bob Dylan song of "You got to serve somebody." It might be the devil or it might be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. Basically, but in the Lord's case, it's just being led, and I think the Lord's leading is so gentle that it's imperceptible. It's very loving and very freedom honoring, kind of leading, as opposed to just being bossed around by people who actually hate and despise you and think you're worthless.
My dad once told me that there was a guy who he knew when they were young, and this guy would go and hang out with this group of guys that really didn't treat him well. He was kind of like bottom of the totem pole for them, and they kind of made fun of him or whatever. I don't know. And my dad was like, "Come hang out with us. Come hang out with us instead. Like we'll do good. You can be one of us." It's the same kind of thing. It's like hell will try to pull you in more and more to hell. It's a miserable existence. It's a miserable time. Heaven is just going to give you the space to grow, and it's going to befriend you, and it's going to lead you. My yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you everything and more that you want. But let's do it this way. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to support us and make this show possible, there's 3 easy ways you can do it. Whatever your preference is, there's a way for you. You can make a super chat right now by that comment button. Just click it, and you can make a donation right there to say whatever show you're watching. This is cool, thank you. You can become a member of the channel. Click that little join button. That sets you up for a recurring donation. You get special members-only content. Or you can click the link in the description, go right to the Swedenborg Foundation, donate to us there, and then we get to keep 100% of the proceeds, so your donation goes even farther. 3 ways to choose. We want to make it easy for you. Thank you for making our life easier by donating to support this programming. Back to the show. All right, now let's talk about good and evil, and why do we have the freedom to choose between those? Because we spent all this time laying out freedom has to do with what you love. There's a freedom to do good. There's a freedom to do evil. You sometimes can't tell the difference apart. Why doesn't God just get the freedom to do evil out of there?
Take that off the table.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
So this is what Swedenborg says in New Jerusalem 143. The purpose of our having freedom to think what is evil and what is false, and even to put them into practice to the extent that the laws do not prevent it, is that it gives us the ability to be reformed. What is good and what is true need to be planted in our love and our will if they are to become part of our life. And there is no way this can happen unless we have the freedom to contemplate both what is evil and false and what is good and true.
Okay, I can see when you say that so the goal is to get this planted in your life. And we heard earlier, life has to do with love, has to do with will, and that comes back to your freedom. So this is those all, to get something into your life, it has to go through your freedom. I can't coerce you, I can't limit you, I can't stop you from whatever. Otherwise, it can never get into your life.
It's interesting that he uses the term planted.
Yes,
because
right.
Swedenborg was an avid gardener and believed that everything you see in the way that the physical world is a reflection of things within the human psyche, which is another way of saying reflection of things that happen in the spiritual world, because those two are one and the same. So for a plant to grow, the ground has to be thawed. There has to be soil. Like, it's not just you can just throw a seed anywhere.
Right.
Famously, there's the parable of the sower Jesus gave in the New Testament. So there's the conditions that have to be met in order for something to become a part of your life. So sure, there's a lot of things that can enter into you. People can tell you things. People can try to give you opinions. You can sit here and watch this program, and we can say a bunch of things, and this is our opinion, right, coming out of our will and understanding. Whether or not that sticks with a viewer and becomes part of their life is entirely, it's on their end, because they have to go through a process of, was I listening to that? Do I think they're right about that? Does that seem good? Does that seem true? And then once it gets into your mind and you think this is kind of cool, then in life situations you have to, all right, well, actually I want to act on that now. And then eventually, according to Swedenborg, that things we hear can become part of who we are. But it can't, the ground is frozen unless our will is engaged. So you have to be doing something because you want to do it, not because anyone's forcing you to do it.
And it implies that you don't already have that. It's something that comes from outside of you. We need something good from outside of ourselves to come in, and then we need to be ready for that. And so at the beginning, it's not part of us. but then we need it to be part of us for this whole thing to work, to get to that higher level of freedom that we were talking about. And I love that soil analogy because it's so true. If the pH is off, or the garden's full of weeds already, there's
nitrogen,
all kinds of conditions under which it's not going to work. This is something of God that God really wants to be in us, but it has to be our freedom that says, yes, I want that in my garden. I'd like this and not that in my garden.
If you bought a tree from a nursery and you brought it home and you planted it, and then a month later it was dying, and you said to them, "Why is my tree dying?"
Yeah.
They'd come out and they'd say, "Well, here's your reason.
Yeah.
You're not watering it enough. Soil pH is wrong. The amount of sunlight is wrong. There's another kind of tree nearby that puts toxins out. What is that, black walnut or something?" So there's all kinds of reasons. So it is with, why can't I just only be able to contemplate good and not evil? That's not actually a free will, and so that can't welcome it in. Let me read a little more of that, because I think he spells out more of the larger context that makes this, to me, a satisfying answer. This freedom is given to each one of us by the Lord. When we are contemplating something that is good and true, then to the extent that we do not at the same time love what is evil and false, the Lord plants that goodness and truth in our love and our will, and therefore in our life, and in this way reforms us. So this gets to the crux of it. Anything that is planted within us while we are in a state of freedom becomes a permanent part of us. Anything, though, that is planted under coercion does not last, because our will is not engaged. The will behind it is that of the person supplying the pressure.
Oh, that's a great point right at the end there, isn't it? So somebody's will is still involved. It's just not yours. If somebody makes you do the right, if God came down and made us, I'm going to make you do the right thing.
Yep.
I'm going to make you treat that person well. I'm going to make you do my will. Well, that's God's will. It's not, if you're coerced, you're not, it doesn't become part of you. You'll get rid of it as soon as you can. You're just under coercion, so it doesn't last.
Because God's will would be engaged. Your will is not engaged in that scenario. It's happening because somebody else wants it. Which is fine. That can happen at times, and that can
sure.
There's all kinds of
a lot of that in
scenarios where it's good to stop someone from doing something, even if they would have wanted to do it.
Yep.
What that can't do is change your will.
Yeah, it can't make you. Yeah, that's right. So you can stop someone from committing certain kinds of crimes or something like that. You can't make them love being a law-abiding citizen or so. That's a different function.
If somebody's been in prison for a violent offense for 10 years and it's time where they're eligible for parole, and they go to the judge and say, I want to get out, on probation, just being able to say, look, I didn't commit any more crimes when I was in prison, it's not enough. The judge is trying to figure out, have you really changed? Is it safe to let you back out, or is it just because you've been supervised and you want to get out, so that's why you're not doing it? You're trying to figure out, is it because you were coerced into living a good life, or have you really had a change of heart?
Yeah.
And now it is safe for the other people living out on the outside for me to put you back out there with them.
A thing they often look at is, do you feel remorse? Do you regret what happened?
Yeah.
If you feel cold-hearted about it, or you don't care, but you just, no, I want to get out.
Right.
That's different than, no, I'm a very different person. I've been reading a lot. I've been, changing myself. I completed my degree while I'm in here and all that. And I've been going to meetings. I'm a completely different person.
So I think that the dark matter in this situation, in the universe, they say, there's planets and things, and that accounts for some of gravity, but
right. This massive amount of
there's all this stuff that we can't see that we know must be there, because otherwise everything doesn't make sense. There's dark matter. The dark matter in this equation, because somebody might be saying, yes, you're telling me now that the reason that God has to let us contemplate both good and evil and do them. And freedom is that creates the conditions in which our will can be changed for the better. We can be reformed. Why do we need to be reformed in the first place? You're saying that the reason we're allowed to contemplate evil is that so we can be rid of evil. Why is there even evil going on in there?
Yeah.
So the dark matter is Swedenborg's concept of heredity.
That's right.
Can you get, like, what's that?
That's right. So I'm just thinking about the parable of the sower and what we were just talking about, that there's a couple of things in there. One is that in and of itself, the land is not ready to go. It's hard, or even if some work was done on it, but it wasn't maintained, it's full of weeds. It's got various different things that make it ill-suited. So there's some preparation that needs to happen. But the other beautiful thing is that there is a sower, there's an active party in this, who's, the divine, the Lord is wanting to plant this wherever possible. And if we do something with our garden, and partly it's just because of an accumulation of hereditary evil. Swedenborg says pretty scary things about this, how we inherit tendencies toward evils of all different kinds from our parents and grandparents and so on down the line. But then we add some active evil of our own to it, which is our great achievement. Yeah. And so we can feel very proud about that.
I've got a trophy on my mantle.
And so if nothing intervenes, the human race will tend to get worse over time because there's accumulation of. So you inherit this, and then I added my new. They gave me an addictive personality, but I added violence to it. Okay, good, well done. Yeah. And so that gets passed on to the next generation. And the only thing that breaks that, Swedenborg talks about, is there are laws and there are various things, and even suffering is actually good for breaking up that life. I know people who got in a terrible car accident when they were drinking, and that it kind of sobered them up. They sort of realized, I've got to change my life. So there are things that can stop that downward run.
Yeah.
But really, and the idea of a higher power is in the 12-step group so much. It seems to be an important component in changing around to where you can start to prepare that soil. So by now, maybe the earliest human beings didn't have, their soil was good. They were born with good soil. Yeah. I'm afraid the soil is not great now. Our soil is, we need work. We need work to have a garden. And this is not something Swedenborg gives a ton of detail on, but he says somehow over time, the human race, because of this cumulative impact that he's talking about, we're corrupted. It's like a brown field. It's like you're trying to garden on a brown field. Isn't that right? That brown field is something that in the city, this used to be a chemical factory. Yes. And when they were doing their work there, all kinds of chemicals have leached into the soil. So a Superfund site, something like that, where they say, all right, nobody could actually eat crops grown from this for this many decades. You have to do remediation. You have to be very careful just to even handle that soil. You have to wear gloves or, protective equipment to even deal with it, to try to remedy that. And even if it's not you, even if the person who's going to try to build a house there or grow a garden there today, they didn't have to, the factory wasn't them, but it was the people that came before them. So it is this with the state of the human race. If we could just pull another metaphor in here, my eyeballs, they don't work. I'm wearing contact lenses right now. Really? Sometimes on the channel, people say, hey, Curtis, you have nice eyes. You don't want these things. They don't work. I have a -3.5 in these. If my contacts are out, it's very easy to surprise me. Okay. Why are they like that? Well, I got them from my parents. It's my parents' fault. But why did my parents have them? Go back generation after generation after generation. Somewhere along the lines, some kind of genetic thing started to go wrong. Not everybody has it, but something in a certain strain of humanity started to go wrong. But yet we survived anyway, my ancestors, and they just kept going. They had glasses or whatever you needed to do. And so that condition, because it wasn't fatal, now it's part of the population. And so I have it. It's no fault of my own, but it's just something. So I have to do the work in my life of every morning. Right.
open up these little one-day single-use contacts. Shunk. This morning, like there's people in the bathroom, so I had to take them over to the sink and dunk, dunk. That's work that I have to do just to get back to normal. That's like this being reformed in a state of freedom. People have this sense of the reason that you start with this appeal. There's an appeal to doing evil things. That's messed up. That's like having eyes that don't work. That is not how it should be.
Yeah.
That there's any kind of dopamine hit from stealing the toy from the other kid, but that is absolutely the condition of the human race, and it's because the same things happen spiritually. Way back in the day, some people decided or started, I don't know exactly the details, but they started to feel like, hey, we can conquer our neighbors, we can amass their wealth, we can dominate over them. Human beings started to do that, and it accumulated in the spiritual genome. And so we start out today with a brown site. Going metaphor switch, go with the brown site. We have to try to clean that up in order to get rid of the evil. And you can't just say, let's get rid of the tendency toward evil. Let's get rid of your ability to contemplate evil or know what it is, because that doesn't get the chemicals out of the ground. That would just get them trapped in there. And Swedenborg in many passages, one more metaphor, please. Swedenborg in many passages said that's like an infected wound that's not opened that will kill the user. In the beginning of the show, you said if we didn't have the freedom to contemplate evil, the entire human race would be doomed. That is because if we're going to get out from under this and we're going to clean this whole thing up, each of us individually has to be able, knowing that you could do either, you do good.
Yes.
That is the magic action. I could do either, and I would be rewarded with joy for doing either one. It's not like it was an easy choice because only good feels good. Knowing that I have these two in equal balance, they're sitting there in front of me, I'm doing what's good because I know that it's good. That's the magic that can only happen in a state of freedom.
Aren't people sensitive to this? Like, I'm just thinking of a situation in which, let's say, in the future, people get robotic suits or something that move their limbs if they're not strong enough to walk around
dance.
Do stuff, and so imagine one person's falling in love with another person and
you just thought this up, okay,
but the person comes in with the robot suit and gives them a very nice present, but the other person's like, is that your software, or did you? Like, I can't tell if you wanted to. I can't do. I'm sorry. I can't help it. My arms just do this. It's not meaningful if you think that they didn't even want to do it. It's just the suit is just. This is what you do. Yeah. On the third day, you give them some.
It just OS 1.79 just does that.
Update. Yeah. It just does that.
Because you're future-proofing
because you always suspect. That's like, did you? Are you saying that because you think you ought to, or you have to, or are you really choosing?
There's an incentive. When there's mixed incentives, you don't even know in yourself. Like right now, we're sitting here and we're trying to tell people about what's in Swedenborg. Yeah. And I know that there's a part of the reason is because I love what's in Swedenborg, and I think that it will help the human race, and I think it's where you can meet God, and it's done for me what I needed it to do when I was needing help and I was lonely and afraid, and it helped me. That's part of it. But also it's like, look, we get all this attention for it. People are going to watch us and say, good job on your show. So you can't even know for sure. Whenever there's whenever there's overlapping incentives, you can never know for sure why are you really doing it. You don't even really have to. You just overall you're asking God, please lead me toward what's good. Yeah, that's the magic process. So for everybody, there's going to be a mix of things in there, but if you have these equal incentives, that there's an incentive to do evil just like there's an incentive to do good, but yet I'm going to still try to do good, and I'm going to, even more importantly from Swedenborg's perspective, I'm going to reject the incentive to do evil, even though this would feel great and this would get me, maybe it would get me some of that power I'm looking for. Not that you're always going to know clearly what's good or evil, but based on what you think, your best estimate,
your best shot.
If you take a stand, especially at cost to yourself, and say, I'm not, even though I would like this, I'm not going to do it because I think it's not good, that is a very meaningful action for the state of your will. That is when the Lord can change the state of your will.
And to throw in yet another analogy, in case we don't have enough so far, just with a flip of a coin or something like that, yes, you'll get heads or tails on one flip. The way this whole, if you think of this life as a game of a kind, it's not set up to be determined by one flip. It's averages. And it's over the long haul. It's tens of thousands of coin flips. Mm-hmm. And we see that this person, about 58% of the time, it's heads. And that's what we're looking for. Over time. Like, yes, we're all petty sometimes. When you get tired or you're sick or something, you bark at somebody or what, we all have that stuff that comes to the surface. But it's just which way is the line of the long-term average? Which way is it going?
And that it could only go some way in this state, which is called choosing good when you could have just as easily chosen evil.
Yes. In fact, there's a powerful passage somewhere where Swedenborg says that if you had the opportunity and the inclination, which we don't always do.
Sure.
I mean, your favorite evil may not come up every day. I said, well, I'd love to do this, but I don't know how you do that. I don't know how people do it.
Jonathan's wallet's on the table over there. I've been trying to steal it, but he's looking at me this whole time. So I can't, I'm not going to steal it. It doesn't mean, I'm good,
No, that doesn't count for much. But if you have the opportunity, everybody's out of the room, wallet's still sitting there, and then you don't, for a positive, not just because you're afraid of getting caught or something.
Because the cameras
like that.
are on, right?
The cameras are on, still recording, hot mic or something.
No, I didn't.
We got to get a shot of that. But when you could, and you didn't.
Yeah, that's magic.
And particularly for some sort of religious or spiritual reason, for some altruistic, because it's good for other people, or it's good for my soul, or it's good for, I'm following some kind of religious law or some spiritual principle here. So I'm not going to do it because I believe that there's an afterlife, or because I believe that God and the angels see everything, that we're just because physical people are out of the room, there's still spiritual cameras running all the time.
It's because
it's an honest world after death and things like that.
Yeah, and the only real reason to not steal it is, how would I feel? Of course, I'm not gonna take your you're gonna need that money, and you're gonna feel terrible, and it's harmful.
Yeah.
So I won't do it. That is a spiritual phenomena that cannot exist outside of freedom. That choosing to do good when there was an alternative, that's different. And I do think Swedenborg, in some ways, describes a limited God, in that he says there is no other way for us to accept something that becomes a permanent part of us than in freedom.
That's right.
The God
can't just be sort of bolted on. It's good. Yeah.
And before, I think we alluded to it, that consciousness and freedom are the same thing. People think of, you could just have human beings without that. And also that God can just at any point wave a wand and change everything. That's not what Swedenborg seems to indicate. That just like if you look at the biosphere, we talk about environmental degradation, that if you go in, and we use our factory analogy, if you're dumping your waste into this creek for 20 years and then it gets outlawed, the creek is wrecked. And to bring it back to health is a complicated,
it's a long
process that certain things, and anybody who just knew how that works would say, of course, first you got to get these PCFs, whatever, those have to get out of there, and then you have to get the heavy metals out of and this is how you get, because if they're there, the algae can't grow, or if it does, then the animals that eat that, you just know there's so much going on, there's so much structure and everything. That's how the human race's heart and mind is. It's wrecked. It's wrecked, and it's this huge reclamation project, and that can only happen with conscious free beings. That to actually turn good, it can only happen in the state of freedom. So if you didn't have the ability to, both menus are there, but I'm choosing to, this metaphor is central around here. I'm choosing to order off of this heaven menu, even if I like something at this point on the hell menu more.
Yeah.
I don't like where they source their ingredients from. I don't like the additives they have in there. I got to order off this one. That's how we just start to clean that up.
Yeah. To the idea of taking the wallet, of not doing it partly because you wouldn't want somebody doing it to you, and you wouldn't want a work environment where you can't even leave your stuff. You know what I mean? You want to be able to just leave your stuff there, film a show, leave, and it's not going to be taken by anybody. In other words, you're doing unto others as you would have them do unto you.
You think that it seems like it's all pretty much the same. Like I'm sitting here having this conversation. That's fun. I get to do what I want. I get to talk about these things. Also, is that like a $20 bill sticking out of Jonathan's wallet? Awesome. Then I can have that and I can go buy this thing. Those are two totally different things.
Yeah.
If you're in a point where your mind is so calloused that you think, I can go and just do that, and you're not understanding the horror of what that is to break that trust, to deprive somebody of their goods. You don't realize, like, those two things, that's heaven and hell. Those are infinitely far apart.
Right.
We've become so depraved that you think it's like we desensitize to the point. It's like, those two things, they're not that different.
Fun.
It's like, okay, that's great.
Well, this would also be fun. I'm enjoying this, and it would also be fun to do that.
But it's like this like statesman who looks all like gentlemanly and stuff, and then he just lets this huge burp out or something. It's like those two things are totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different from each other, and we don't even realize it. The human race doesn't even realize how messed up it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, he closes this quote like this. That is also why worship in a state of freedom is pleasing to the Lord, but forced worship is not. Worship in freedom is worship that comes from love. Forced worship does not come from love.
Yeah, that seems like a really important point, that the essence of what the Lord's looking for, or hoping for out of worship, is something where you really, really wanted. He doesn't want a bunch of people lining up who didn't want to be there or something, No, when your heart is just like, no, I want to do it. I'm all in. And the only way all in can mean anything is if there's a all out option. There's a don't do it option.
If you are doing what is good because you're scared of God, if you're saying God is so great because you're scared of God and the retribution, the punishment you think he's going to put on you, at something, religion can be an opiate for the masses. I don't know if opiate is really the right word, but it can be something that keeps you in line.
Social control or something.
Social control. Right. This is to keep the worst element of humanity, sure, it can do that on its lowest base function, and maybe we're better off for that.
Yeah.
But that's not, that's not what God's after. That's like, okay, if we're going to have to just duct tape this thing so people aren't treating each other horribly. But what we're looking for is people doing what's good, which is the same thing as worshiping, out of a desire to do it. Because you want to do it, because you love it, because you understand what it means. When we're going back to that movie where it's like, oh, actually, I love these people and I didn't even realize it. If somebody just came along at the beginning of the movie and said, you have to love your family more. Okay, or else what? Or else I'm going to throw you out this window. Okay, I'll go and... No, that's not heartwarming. That's not getting on a Hallmark channel, because that's not what love is really about. I was like, oh yeah, do you see that? Like a Forced Christmas with Joan Bettler. So please, would somebody make my dad want to spend more time with us? Sure, kid, I will. Hey, if you don't spend more time with him, it's so heartwarming.
I'll break your thigh.
That's not how love works.
No, that's right. It's got to come from the inside.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about how evil might seem like it's freedom, but it isn't. Because
that's a pretty important point. And it's freedom one, but not freedom two.
Yeah, like it's sort of freedom, but it's sort of not freedom. But that is not how it feels. I think you'd get a lot of people saying, what are you even talking about? So Swedenborg anticipates this in New Jerusalem 144. No matter how similar they look on the surface, freedom to do good and freedom to do evil are as different and remote from each other as heaven and hell. The freedom to do good comes from heaven and is called heavenly freedom, while the freedom to do evil comes from hell and is called hellish freedom. That actually, according to Swedenborg, the ability itself like beams into you from the spiritual world, either from the Lord through heaven or up from hell. The actual animating force in you is different when you're doing those two actions.
This is blowing my mind a little bit because I think of freedom as being almost like a switch on a railroad or something where you can, it can be this, a light switch or anything where it could be this way, it could be that way. And yet Swedenborg's saying this is one kind of freedom. That's those are two different. Freedom is not this thing. It's not the switch. This is one freedom. That's another freedom.
Yes.
And this is heavenly freedom. This is hellish freedom.
Which is different than people generally think of freedom. They think of freedom, right, as the switch controller. But this does, again, though, it does line up with the idea that freedom is being able to do what you want. And he's saying that the feeling of wanting to do good is freedom, a certain kind of freedom, and the freedom of wanting to do evil. Wanting to do evil is a kind of freedom. Wanting to do good is a kind of freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like kind of different. He's kind of redefining it, but he's kind of giving you the definition you actually would think when you just, what is freedom? So it's like, it's this weird, it's kind of both.
And as he so often does, he points back to where is this coming from?
Yeah.
He's not actually actions are terribly important to Swedenborg, but where did it come from? Why did you do that? What was the motivation? He keeps pointing your attention back up the chain to what was it? What was in your heart and what was flowing into your heart that you were responding to? And that's where that action came from.
Well, that's terribly important to human beings. This is the difference between first-degree murder and manslaughter.
Oh, true.
Is it, were you trying to? This is why in movies...
Did you intend? Did you think about it ahead of time? Or was this sort of spontaneous? Was this just
even
rash moment?
That's like how the courts of the world run.
Yeah, that's right.
Because what we really care about is your intent. And
not that you just sort of flamed up, something made you angry and you just acted out in that second. But if you contemplated it for 3 years and got the necessary equipment, that's darker.
And even that you could have done the same thing, you could ended up causing death, but you weren't trying to. That's it. It's not. There's nothing, but it's very different.
It's completely different. Yeah,
it's a very what you're thinking. This is why in movies it will drive me crazy when there's like a misunderstanding where the guy does something that's the wrong thing to do, and the girl is like, "How could you do that when you something?" And he wasn't trying to do that,
right.
And they don't like communicate that. It's like it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
Right.
To the extent that we have the one freedom, we do not have the other. No one can serve two masters. He quotes Matthew 6.
So there's your switch.
Yeah.
It's one way or the other way. So that's an important point. The freedom is not that you could do both at once. The option, you're going one side or the other.
Yeah, right. And you sort of can toggle while you're in the world, you toggle a bit, but I think you have overall something comes to dominate.
Yes.
You get, it's like, no, you stay in this, you stay with it switched to the right for long enough. And that's kind of where, I don't know,
especially in your grown up life when,
yes,
you have all the capacities and everything that goes with being an adult.
So here's an interesting angle on that. We can also see from this that people who have hellish freedom see it as slavery and bondage if they are not allowed to will what is evil and think what is false whenever they like it, while people who have heavenly freedom loathe to will anything evil and to think anything false. And if they are forced to do so, it torments them.
I love that. That's very typical Swedenborg, isn't it? That your definitions switch. That's what's so slippery about these things, is that to someone who's in a certain state, that would be bondage and slavery not to be allowed. Freedom is let me do the thing that I love doing.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. Let me do it. Remove the obstacles. Let me do more of this and get rid of all the other nonsense in life. That's just fascinating.
Well, it's like, I moved into this area. There's a whole bunch of squares here. They don't go out. They don't. I want to be. Like, we're not allowed to. I don't know. Whatever. Like no public profanity. Come on, man. Like let me do. Versus other people who are like, what? The last thing I want to do is go out to a club right now. Are you kidding me? I would hate that. So it's like a silly example, but you definitely get this. People with differing loves and lifestyles feel constricted if they're in the wrong area.
Yes. Very familiar human experience, isn't it?
So these two different kinds of freedom lead to two different kinds of selfhood, according to Swedenborg.
Selfhood. Okay, now there's another key word. What does that mean?
And this is something he alluded to way back in the beginning. And you think, why are you packing this into your sentence? But if you go all the way back to 141, he says at the end, this is why anything we do freely seems to us to have come from ourselves. And you're like, well, why do you put that in there?
It seems to come from ourselves.
That's okay. You should have gotten rid of that sentence. But here's where it matters.
Okay.
He says, since acting from freedom seems to come to us from ourselves, this is me being me.
This is me.
Like,
right.
How much are people talking about, like,
me.
I need to express myself?
Yes.
I need to express myself.
Authentic.
Be authentic to who I am.
This is who I am.
Now, to Swedenborg and Bob Dylan, you're always expressing somebody. You're either expressing the heavenly side of you, which is really God coming through heaven and coming out of you, or you're expressing what hell wants you to express. But yet, no matter if we're doing it in freedom, we feel like this is just who I am, and this wants to be expressed as who I am.
That's right. So there's a very important concept in there that there's two selves, at least two that you could be. There's a good self or an evil self, and so you're authentic. Well, which self?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Which part are you manifesting?
In the beginning, you quoted scripture when you said, from how far you have fallen. This is, again, you just look at movies and things. It's like the classic, this guy used to be the best fighter pilot around here, but now look at him. He's like, his life is a mess, and it's together, but it's like, come on, we need you for one more mission that only you can do. It's because there's like, no, this is who you could have been.
He starts getting up early and exercising.
I can hear that montage music right now. It's because there's like who you could have been. And so there's like the potential for you to be the good version of you or to be the bad version of you.
Yeah.
And this is, so Swedenborg says.
People talk about an evil twin, don't they? Like my evil twin did that. That concept is out there.
Yep. Since acting from freedom seems to us to come from ourselves, heavenly freedom can also be called heavenly selfhood. And hellish freedom can be called hellish selfhood. Hellish selfhood is the sense of self into which we are born, and it is evil. Heavenly selfhood, though, is the sense of self into which we come as we are reformed, and it is good.
Wow. So it gets right down to even the selfhood, which I can see how connected that is with the idea of freedom, because that's who you feel. I made this choice. This is what I choose. This is, and pretty soon that becomes, this is who I am.
This is who I am.
This is who I am. I like this. I prefer this. I'd rather not do that, or I can't do this. Or so that selfhood, it's amazing to think about. And a little chilling, again, to think that basically Swedenborg seems to be saying we all start out with a bad selfhood.
Well,
even though you can see sweet traits in little kids and stuff like that he talks about where that comes from, the heavens flowing through them and stuff like that. But still, basically, he's saying we're all dealt a bad hand, and we have to trade in cards to get a better hand. We have to do something. We have to cultivate that soil. We have to do something to get to that heavenly selfhood, and that's what puts such an urgency on messages like this to me. Is that you've got lots of messages in the world saying, in effect, be your worst self, or lots of support for being insane or out of control or something. And there's lots of support. There's lots of self-help or lots of things out there telling you, no, be a good person.
Yeah.
But it's so important because that's the harder, the narrow path, right? That's the narrow way, is to try to be more heavenly.
But it's pretty obvious in some ways that we start out with a bad will. Just look at what you were like when you were a youth. So yesterday was my 40th birthday.
Is that right?
And somebody,
happy birthday.
Somebody said here in the office said like, oh yeah, life begins at 40. And I was like, I'm into that. I would do that. And
That's
I
good.
was Zoom meeting with someone, and we had Zoomed a lot of times. Like we knew each other well, but he didn't realize how old I was. And he's like, oh, I thought you were more like 36 or something. And I was like, hey man, no, I don't want to be, because I think of myself at 36. And even just 4 years ago, I'm like, I'd much rather be me now. But if you just look back at what my priorities were when I was 20 and what I thought was that, no, like that will, even the stuff that I thought shone so brightly and was so good. No offense to Adam, who's here at the camera. How old are you?
22.
Okay, you're doing great. You're better than I was at 22.
Yeah, that's
he
for
said
sure.
he was
Me
at
too.
22. But what I'm trying to say is it gets better. And for me, it's obvious. Like, oh yeah, no, this is. There's been times when I was a person who now I'm like, that's not that great. That's not so great that you're being like that. But at the time, I felt like this is so who I am.
Yeah.
And I think it does. I think this is the trajectory of life shows you like stuff that you used to feel like that's core to who I am. You come to realize it's not as sparkly as I thought it was. And what is really, even what I admire in people, and what I find to be admirable and noble and true and good in people, that's changed. When you're really young, like I was thinking about when I was a teenager, and I used to have this sense of obviously like social performance is everything, and I always thought like, well, I don't want to be one of those grown-ups that kind of like forgets what it was like to be a teenager. I thought like I'm going to go through, but now I'm like, why would I care at all what it's like to be a teenager? You don't know what you're talking about. Meaning the things, and this is not true for all teenagers all the time, but for me in certain states in there, the things that you venerate and that you honor and that you think are so great and cool, those things aren't. Those things are dumb. That's dumb.
Yeah.
So I can look back at myself and see, oh, sure, I've had all kinds of things that just felt so much like me and they're good, that now I'm like, well, I'm glad that's not really me, because I have a different sense. That's just what you start with, your default settings. Everybody, when you're in high school, everybody just says, well, that person is the most good looking and they are the most popular, so they are the best. And you don't care at all about how people treat each other. You don't care at all about the fact that people, I used to be like, Mom, why are you making me invite everyone to my birthday? I only want to invite these people. Now I'm like, the only thing that is cool is inviting everyone to your birthday, because what matters way more is like the people who are struggling. Like we want them to feel good. That's changed. I didn't see that then. And now I do. And just the side by side, those two things are in different leagues, man. So it's the heavenly selfhood understands that. The hellish selfhood does not. And I'm glad that I'm getting to become more and more this person. I've still got plenty of hellish selfhood in me. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who's spent any time with me, but there's a little bit of heavenly selfhood in there, which is like, that's God did that. We can't do that, but it's good when it happens.
It just strikes me that the switching the pleasures around is so hard, because a lot of it, like what you do as a default when you're young, is it just feels good. It felt really good to me when I was younger to make fun of people, to be able to, mock them. A friend of mine and I would sit on a bench in the mall and look at people go by, and we just stereotype them and sort of make fun of them. It was tremendous fun, and we felt superior and everything. We were just two very sad, pathetic people, And I have no interest in going back to that bench and sitting there and mocking people. The only valuable thing in there was some sense of noticing somebody outside of yourself and trying to assess in some way who is this person, what do they need, how are they doing in their life, or something like that. So there might be some tiny little through line, but otherwise, I want no part of that. That's like, that doesn't do me. I'm not happier. I feel alienated from everybody because I've just judged them all and think they're all falling short or something like that. And I'm pathetic. I'm unemployed. I got nothing going on in my life, And
but you got a cool seat at the mall there. Like,
that's
nice
right.
bench. Your parents don't come to pick you up.
And I've got quality time to sit there and judge people.
That's such a great example. Thank you for bringing that up and for your honesty on that. And there's two ways in which the Lord can. I used to have like the same kind of spirit doing different things, but it's like the Lord can lead you out of that in two ways, through the miracle of becoming old and 40. One thing is, I know right now, if I, looking like me now, walked by you on the bench, you guys would be like, look at that guy. He's like old dad
totally.
bod. He's bald and he doesn't even, it's like one, you'd know like, hey man, that's not, Like when you're young and cool, it's like, yeah, man. But now it's like, hey, man, leave me alone. It's like with hell, you think we're like hell is like influencing our minds to do that stuff. You think we're all in it together. We're all the friends, but you don't realize they would turn on you in a second.
Yes, they would. There's no loyalty and no love there. That's right. No, and as long as you're serving their thing, their agenda, they're all right with you.
Yeah.
But the second you turn, it's going to be like the Egyptian feeling about the children of Israel when they said, actually, we just want to go 3 days to go do this worship thing. They go, no, we're doubling your workload.
Yeah.
You know, they're not the slightest bit interested in you doing what you want to do or what you feel free about.
So
and it's such satisfaction to get to the point of feeling love for people. Like once your heart opens up and you realize people exist outside of you as independent beings and they're struggling, they've got their journey and the Lord loves them and everything.
Yeah.
It's a kind of pleasure and delight, but it's slow to swap those it's like very hard to get to the point of enjoying something that you formerly didn't enjoy, and to break that joy that was unhealthy and antisocial, and to get to a point where no, you're having something that makes a contribution. That's a better place to be.
And just in case anyone's watching this and you're like, well, how do you do that? I would say I have no idea. I have never in my life set out and successfully improved myself morally. Like sure, there's like, but it's all like divine providence does that. God does it, and he'll do it through basically empathy crash courses when things don't go that well for you and you feel bad. Who knows? There's a million ways he sneaks it in there, but it's not like I bootstrapped myself up to realizing the error of my ways. It's just like, no, that's what the Lord does.
A lot of it is, for me, is becoming aware that my plot was full of weeds. If I was so lucky to have any dirt at all, you know, it's full of weeds and thorns, and then really looking at those weeds and really looking at those thorns, and then trying to pull a few, although you know the roots are still in there, they're going to keep coming up, but working away a little bit at it, which is not fun at all. But over time, then a little space gets cleared, and then you start to see something come up. Oh, and that's kind of neat. It's a better flower. But I had nothing to do with that. I don't know how to make that flower. I don't know how to make that happen.
Yeah, all you know is like
you clear a little space and it happens.
Yank, like you're taking out the weeds. I know yank. I can do that. I can yank a weed out. But to grow something good, it's like, oh, there's a tiny little seed with DNA in there, and it has to split open right when the right temperature and light is, and then it has to replicate all these different cells and send down these feeder roots and something nitrogen and something photosynthesis. All this, you just know, like yank. That's really how it is.
That's our job.
And that's all we're asked to do.
Right.
It's like, I think this might not be good. I won't do it.
That's right.
This time, one or like 4 out of 9 times, 5 out of 9 times, I will not do this. That's it. That's the best that we can do, and that's fine. Swedenborg explicitly says that it's not so hard to live a heavenly life as people think.
That's what he says.
It's just about, are you overall trying to use your freedom in a world that rewards you both for good and evil to do what's good. That's it. That's all you need to do.
And a law of averages, not that you did something good 5 years ago, you know, but that there's going to be a little effort today, you know, kind of thing. Just try to get it on the averages.
All right. 2 more points we want to make before we close here. First is that free choice is what makes heavenly freedom real, as we alluded to before. This is what he says in New Jerusalem 146. This shows us what freedom of choice is, namely doing what is good by choice or intentionally. This is the freedom we have when we are being led by the Lord. We are led by the Lord when we love what is good and true because it is good and true. That's what it is to worship the Lord, to be led by the Lord. Is why are you sitting on that bench and you don't make fun of that person? It's not really because it can start out being because, oh God, there's God and God's going to know that I did this, or that there's this, maybe you believe that there's an afterlife, and that in the afterlife that kind of stuff is obvious to everyone that you did it, or something, or there's a life review. Sure, that could be on the way, but you end up getting to, I don't want to do that because that's what a jerk would do. Like I wouldn't want it. I don't even want to think about a person like that. I don't want to think critically about that person because I wouldn't want them to think about that to me. And it's just, that's what it is to follow the Lord. It's just, I wouldn't do that because it's not good.
Yeah. I don't like the whole whiff of it. Like, it's not good.
So if you want to know which one of these freedoms you're operating in, heavenly or hellish, Swedenborg ends with a tip for you.
A diagnostic tool?
A little Geiger counter. We can tell what kind of freedom we have from the pleasure we feel when we are engaged in thought, speech, action, hearing, or seeing, because all the pleasure we feel is a reflection of what we love.
Okay, so there's the pleasure word. Okay, so pleasure does come into it. Yeah, and so even your freedom may not be entirely visible. It's more visible than your will or your love, or but you can get to your freedom through observing what lights you up, what pleases you, and those kind of quiet, not the loud pleasures. One of these passages I was reading about this talked about love of self, love of worldly advantages, and our appetites, like feeding if that's what you're feeding is self-centeredness and appetites and so on.
Yeah.
Not so good. But if your pleasures get to the point where when it's genuinely, when it feels good to have done something, even if nobody knew about it, you did something good, nobody knows, and it still feels no applause, but it was just good, and it felt good to do it.
And that's sort of like a science experiment. It's not, because often it's very rare that you're in a position where you do something good and nobody's going to know about it. It's just the nature of doing what is good is people are going to know about it. And that doesn't mean, somebody said I was good or it gave me some kind of admiration from people, so I shouldn't do it. Like, those are often going to overlap. But if every once in a while, I would literally enjoy that happening. Like that's the thing that really gets me going about it. It's not that I don't like when that person sees that I'm doing it, but the fact that just knowing that would happen, that is cool. That's a reflection of, okay, maybe I'm in heavenly freedom. And you can't tell. You can't tell if you're immersed in hellish freedom or heavenly freedom. You can kind of guess. It's not up to you to do. You remember, you're just like yank a weed. That's all you can do.
That's it.
Is that the point is not that you get it right. The point is, I think I am going to overall try.
Yeah.
That's winning. Is I am getting to a point where I basically understand there's right and wrong. And rightness comes from God and is about the care and love toward every single person and how they're feeling and how life and how we can lead them toward happiness and alleviating their suffering. I understand that there's that. And then there's this other side, which is I can, for all kinds of selfish reasons, do things that are harmful to people. I think I'm going to try to do, overall, I'm going to leave my life doing something that's good and trying to be helpful to the human race. There you go. A+.
Yeah. And we may be able to be deceived by evil spirits or our own hereditary tendencies. And so we think we're doing good, and then it turns out, I got mad when they didn't thank me, or whatever it is. But if you're determined, and I'm going to try again, because even if I get fooled and I get drawn off track, because there's another team on the field, for another analogy, and they're trying to pull the whole play in a different direction than I'm trying to go. They want to use my own energy against me. In the long run, when I get a chance, according to the best shot, my best understanding of what we're doing here, try to do those things. And then you see over time, the Lord takes that intention and is able to do something good with it.
Yeah. It's not like you're like, hey man, Luke Skywalker, he didn't get it, like when they was training, like it took him, the first time he tried to lift that rock, he couldn't.
Yeah.
He's
that's
like,
right.
So forget him. It's a failure.
Right.
Like that's just what the story is. But that training,
that's the training.
The training can only happen in the state of freedom. So to recap, there's this thing called heredity. The human race is in this messed up place. The only way we can get out of it is through our individual little heroes' journeys, where we look the darkness in the face and look the allure of the darkness in the face and everything it offers and say, I'm going to do not that. I'm going to do good because I've lived enough of life to know what it is to be good or be evil. I'm going to try to do that. That is what can change permanently, not only your life, but the life of the generations to come. We can make things better for them.
That's right.
But it wouldn't be real.
We can make that soil better for the next generation.
None of it you can't move an inch without it being done in a state of freedom. Nothing else can grow. So we have to be able to have both options, because it's not just about the forced doing of good, it's about the choosing in a free state to do good. That's where the power is. So that's why the freedom is maintained.
No one can do that for you. No one else outside of you can do it for you. They can help you. They can support you. Not even God can do it for you. We really have to do it ourselves. And that connection with selfhood, just to loop back to the beginning for a second, that's why it would wreck everything if you took that away, because we would have no self. We would have no autonomy. We'd have no, I'm moving in this direction. We'd have no, I'm frustrated and I want to get better at this. All that's gone. You just have sort of a drone army or something, and it all goes away. The whole human thing goes away. The whole heaven thing that the Lord is working on goes away. If you don't have that option of evil, it has to be a live option. It has to be real.
And where we're headed, the intent of why the universe exists, and the divine providence has for its goal a heaven from the human race. So why does anything exist? Why does any molecule anywhere exist? Is because God wanted to bring people into a freely chosen heaven that's real. Bring actual people that weren't him into this heaven.
Into a real heaven.
That is a better state, and it's what everything in the universe is tending toward. That is so much better than anything else you can imagine, that it was worth doing. This whole thing was worth doing.
It's worth giving people freedom and watching them do dumb stuff with it. Let the human race make bad choices. Yeah. It was worth that for the goal.
Yeah, hopefully you all feel like we made it was worth seeing us make our dumb choices in what we talked about here, but we did it.
That's right.
That was great. Thank you for hanging out.
Thanks
for watching, everybody. Stay free and stay good. All right, yeah, great show, everybody. Jonathan's wallet's on the table over there. I've been trying to steal it, but he's looking at me this whole time.